This is pretty significant. I think it's probably looking like the largest data breach in Australian history. It's a little bit hard to tell, of course, because I think the company is still scrambling to figure out exactly what happened and who might be affected. So I have been seeing accounts of people calling up to Optus to find out whether they might be affected and how, and it's not necessarily clear that they can get a straight answer. Optus needed to do a better job. From what I've read so far, I think that there's questions around whether they've secured this information well enough. If they didn't need it, perhaps they should have quarantined it somewhere else. They should have had a better system in place. But that's going to unfold, I think, as this is investigated. And we need a well-funded regulator, which we currently don't have. We have an underfunded regulator in the form of the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner to be able to do that work. But you're right, absolutely. I think the government's got a role to play in helping citizens do better at protecting their information. And, this is going to be a costly exercise, not just for the company, but for consumers and also the government. If people have to apply for a new passport, they have to apply for a new driver's license. This is all costly and administrative. And I think there's an argument that companies should be incentivised to avoid those kinds of costs, not just to offload them onto consumers who might be affected, or the taxpayer who then has to fund, this kind of change of identity documentation that will take place as a result of this. So I think there's things the government can do, and I don't want to be too glib about it, but one of the things I think they should do is reform privacy law to update it for the 21st century to better prevent these kinds of problems occurring, these kinds of events, and reduce the burden on consumers to then be the people that have to fix it. And we're currently undergoing a review of the Privacy Act. It includes a number of recommendations, one of which is that consumers should be able to directly take complaints about their companies who've breached their data or lost control of their data to court. And I think that would be an improvement on the current system, which is just channeling these complaints through the regulator. So there is reforms that can happen, I think, that could allow Australians to better protect their privacy and to hold companies accountable when they haven't done the right thing.
Okay, well, those reforms are down the track. What about, right now, what are you saying to people who might be caught up in this? And does the government's idea about forcing Optus's data to be shared with banks earlier than they normally would to try and protect people have any sort of standing with you?
Yeah, look, I understand why that might need to happen, but I'm a bit concerned that kind of the answer put forward to a data breach is to allow greater sharing of data between large companies. When you're moving data at this scale, there's always a risk that mistakes happen or that systems aren't as robust as they should be. So there's a question around whether that's really a long-term solution to this particular problem that we've confronted in recent days. I think large companies should be working together to make sure that if there are data breaches like this, that the losses, the risks that arise can be minimised as much as possible. But we do need to start thinking long term, because this may be the biggest data breach in Australian history, but the next one is probably just around the corner. And there's lots of companies that collect very sensitive information, not just telcos, but obviously banks, but organisations like rental agencies are collecting vast amounts of very sensitive information, and they need to have secure systems. So if companies are looking at this, they should be thinking how they can make sure they're not the next company to be making headlines around a data breach. And that's, I think, the thinking we need to bring to these kinds of problems. Sure, we need to deal with and triage the problem as it exists now, but also thinking about how we can create an environment where these things are less likely to happen.